your first goal ought to be your relationship with God. Second of all ought to be your family relationship. And then it should be your career or your vocation. And all of these are necessary and essential and right. The question is, how do I prioritize and balance this? I don't think any of us would argue with the fact that our relationship with God ought to be first. Our family ought to be second. Our careers and vocations ought to come after that. But how do we juggle that? How do we make all of that fit in this journey with God? Your first identity is as a worshiper of the Lord Jesus Christ. Before anybody calls you a son, God calls you a worshiper. Before anybody ever called you a banker or a lawyer or a dentist or a doctor or whatever your title is, before you ever had that identity, you had this God identity. You are called of God to be a worshiper. If I'm going to be a worshiper, there are some essentials in my life. There's got to be a personal devotion to that God. If I'm going to be a true worshiper, then there's got to be a personal devotion to God. You can't get there without these essentials. So your personal time with God is absolutely essential. Somewhere you have to have time of private prayer, private Bible reading and study, private fasting, private worship. You've got to have a time alone with God. You can't rebuild a temple if you can't build an altar. These are the essentials. You can't get to where you can come to church and feel God quickening and awakening, feel the emotion, the excitement of that, but then you got to go home and you got to build a private place with God.